Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to Unity of Charlotte. And my name is the Reverend Lisa Herklotz. I co-minister here with Reverend Jim Ernstsen, and we are delighted to see everyone who's here in person. We're delighted if you're joining us online. And if you happen to be watching this later, we're glad you checked in. We'd like to start off by reading our mission statement, our purpose, and reason for why Unity of Charlotte is here. So please join with me as we say, Unity of Charlotte is the place where we nurture a deep and mature experience of God through the practice of unity principles. Simply put, we are here to love, grow, and serve. Thank you. Do we have anyone here for the first time? Any first-time visitors? Don't see. If you happen to be online for the first time, second, or maybe even third, checking us out, we'd love to get to know you and send you some information about Unity. Just put your information in the chat, and our chat welcomer will be sure we get that, and we'll send you some information as you request. We're glad you're here. There's many ways to find out what's going on at Unity. We have a website, a weekly newsletter. We have a Facebook page. Please go on and like that page if you haven't already. We have a YouTube channel where you can check out all our past services. We're also asking you subscribe, because the more subscriptions we get, something wonderful happens. Still haven't clarified what that is yet, but I know it's going to be good. Do you know? Oh, no. Well, one of these, I'm going to go subscribe because. And finally, if you're here in person, please check out the bulletin board. We have lots of new things posted. We always have new things going on. So please check that out. Let's now take a moment to turn into prayer. I invite you to gently close your eyes and take a moment to focus within. As we move from our head to our heart space, we come together in this sacred time to remember, claim, and affirm the power and presence of God, Spirit, Divine Mind in every situation, regardless of appearances. There is nowhere that God is not. And as we open to this awareness, we uplift all of those who may be suffering in one form or another. Those living in fear or anxiety or stress, those seeking a physical healing, those dealing with challenging world issues. We uplift them in prayer, acknowledging the power and presence of God is never missing. We open our own hearts in love, knowing that is the power which connects us as one, guides us to wise choices, and fills us with the capacity for compassion, empathy, and understanding for all living beings. In the name and power of that presence, we declare this to be so, and so it is. Amen. I'd like to open this space now, if you want to gently keep your eyes closed. We open this space now to lift up anyone in prayer. You may speak their name out loud now. World leaders, community leaders, Unity of Charlotte. As each name is spoken aloud or spoken within our own heart and mind, we know Spirit is already present and working in and through that person, that situation, to bring about the highest good for all. So it is. Please join me in saying the unity prayer of oneness. There is one presence and one power in my life and universe, God, the good, omnipotence. A reminder that we have a prayer team. If you have any prayer requests you would like to leave to have them pray over, please fill out a form. There's a prayer box right outside the door. There's an online form that you can get to anytime. That once that form is filled out, it goes to our prayer team. They pray over it for 30 days. It then moves out to Silent Unity at Unity Worldwide Ministries, where it's prayed over for another 30 days. Also, Silent Unity is available via app or phone 24/7. And they actually have live people, once again, manning phones 24/7. So if you ever need to reach out to someone in prayer, use that phone number. I believe that's posted on the bulletin board if you don't have it. And now I would like to invite up Chris to read our daily word.
Good morning, Unity of Charlotte. Daily word, Sunday, May 4th. Compassion. As I close myself in thoughts of compassion, I may struggle to feel the compassion, especially when I feel angry. If there's hurtful words or hostile actions seem to cruel or unjust, I may feel tempted to respond in kind. However, striking back does not end conflicts or heal relations. Instead, as I turn within and feel the Christ mind dissolving my anger, I feel calm. At those breakthrough moments, I remember anger does not satisfy anyone or solve problems. Regardless of how justified I may feel expressing my upset, it is within my power to choose compassion instead. I will not reciprocate with others' hostility. I will instead look beyond the anger and see their struggles. I need not approve their choices to see them as children of God today and every day. Clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience. Galatians 3:12. Daily Word.
Thank you, Chris. And now you may remain seated as we join Judi Vinar in the song Enlightened.
No man's sin original, nothing's black and white. What is seen on surface never quite reveals the light. Like a tunnel, one perception can be funneled down, infected, overgrown. No man's mind is criminal, no crime done is pure. Every heart is searching, but the answers often blur. And so we battle for our places, and we take what we believe is ours to own. The pain which robbed our innocence can only be denied for a time. Then finds a crooked path that leaves us stumbling like the crippled and the blind. What could we have done? What would we have done if awakened? What could we have done? What would we have done if awakened? You are not an enemy, but are you a friend? Well, many times we've tried it, but old wounds still keep colliding. One the victim, one the prisoner, committed, both convicted, neither free. What could we have been today? What could be the truth? That this pain we've co-accused stems from a deeper root, and dare we view it in the crevice, see its treasure, or we bury bitter fruit. The pavement back to innocence is worn and torn and twisted for a time. Enlightened are the few who seek their ration and take hold the knotty vine. What could we have done? What would we have done if awakened? What could we have done? What would we have done if awakened? What would we have done if awakened was?
That was Judi Vinar. And she wrote that song. So I give her a lot of credit for writing and performing, as well as her guitar playing and singing. It's interesting, the name of the song is Awakened, but I wrote down here, Enlightened. Is it the same? Wow, kinda. So I don't know where I was when I was doing our order of service, enlightened as well. So we're going to talk about communication, talk about using different words for things. Today we're going to talk about communication. And the signal beneath the static is kind of my title for this today. Do you recognize that? If you're my age, that's an AM car radio. If you're born later, you might not even notice what that is. That could have been the radio in my very first car. My very first car was a 1964 Ford Falcon, and I was envious of my friends who had an FM radio. My radio was AM only, and so it's a picture of this. Let's go ahead and turn that up a little bit. I want to give you a little taste of this.
We're rolling out our managed drilling.
So that's us. That's me going from station to station, trying to find a song that I recognize to bop down the street in. And I'm using that tuner, I'm using that dial, I'm finding the static in between, I'm finding a station and deciding to go to the next station. So you're going to notice that the static in between the signal. There could be a strong signal there. And even if you find something and you're driving down the street, sometimes you even have to kind of tweak it and go back and forth a little bit to find that sweet spot of that signal in order to listen to that. So today we're going to use this as a metaphor. We're going to use this signal beneath the static as a metaphor to the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about communication with both the divine and each other, the divine souls that we are. So that's what we're going to talk about is that static and that signal that talks about the communication of all things within this world. The signal beneath the static. So we're going to explore how God's guidance shows up, how that communication shows up for us in our world. And I'm going to admit, communication for me of the divine is not a voice that speaks to me. Okay? I'm not saying it isn't for you, but that small voice is not something that speaks words to me. God's guidance for me shows up as love. God's guidance for me shows up as wisdom within my heart as well. And I'm going to get this out of the way a little bit. We're going to also talk about releasing those assumptions within our lives, those expectations that we have within our lives, about helping each other to hear and communicate more effectively. So we're going to get in tune with that strong signal. We're going to leave that static behind. We're going to talk about divine communication. We're going to talk about the assumptions that we make as we communicate with each other, the other divine members of our community, and the practical steps we can take to improve that communication within our lives. So let's go ahead and start with that first one, that divine communication. The divine communication, I wrote the statement, divine love flows through me. That's the communication from the divine that I experience in my life. But I wanted to start that first piece with the explanation or the term when I say that divine love flows through me. That divine love is what I'm calling God. Now, some of us have an allergy to that word, God, so we use different things. We use universe. I use divine spirit. Whatever it is that you use for that term of that all creative power, that's what I'm talking about in divine love. Divine love is another term that we use for God, and it flows through me. It flows through me. Our definition of God does not include that dichotomy of good versus evil, at least within the New Thought community, within unity itself, the unity movement. It's not a good versus evil. It's not a hot versus cold. It's not a peace versus war. It is love. That's the definition that I come back to over and over again. God is not dualistic, but instead, that divine spirit, that divine love is good. Love, wisdom, life, power, and even light. Those are the qualities of which we're communicating with. And I would argue that if you're feeling love, you are tuned in. You are experiencing that divine communication. If you feel it, that's it. That's that divine love that's flowing through you and me as well. We had one of our great pub theologies this last Thursday. We met at Sir Ed's 5:30 on first and third. Yeah, first and third. The third one is at J Dragon. But we had a really good conversation. I would think you can ask those folks that showed up there. But we brought with us. I'm going to go off camera for a second. We talked a little bit about communication as well. We set up the topic. Who's read the 4 agreements? Yay. Absolutely. One of those agreements is do not make assumptions, right? Do not make assumptions. And for many of us, it means something a little bit different for each one of us. But we're going to talk a little bit about that, that idea as well. So hold that idea of Don Miguel Ruiz, and we'll get back to that in a little bit. But in pub theology, we talked about, and we have in the past as well, we've talked about the Bible and the communication that happens within the Bible. How does that show up from the Bible? And first of all, we need to understand that for unity, we think of the Bible not literally. We think of it as allegorical many times. We think of it as being interpreted metaphysically. And that deeply allegorical writing is what Charles Fillmore saw as that progression of the Bible from the Old Testament, the Hebrew Scriptures, all the way up through the New Testament or the Christian Scriptures. It's an allegorical, it's a metaphorical example of our progress as of humankind. That's what it is. And it tells the story of individual lessons for us to take to heart as well. So each one of those stories as well. He taught that each of these stories is a metaphysical story of our progression individually as well. So it's not just a history story. It's not just the story of the Israelites, but it's for us to learn as well. So we ask ourselves the question, what does it mean when we're talking about divine communication? In the Old Testament, we are seeing that from the difference between the communication from Old Testament to New Testament is different. We have to admit that. It's different. It looks different. It has a different feel, a different look and feel to that. Early on, God spoke to individuals. You've got Abraham, you've got Moses. God speaking directly to them, and then that message gets spread out from there. A little bit different than we would see in the New Testament. God spoke to individuals. That message was focused on God's laws and warnings to his people. That's what the Old Testament does over and over and over again. It's a warning a lot of times. But yet, we move into maybe a higher vibration when we get into the New Testament, a different lesson for each of us. First of all, there's not as much a Moses figure or an Abraham or an Elijah speaking to the rest of the people. It's more mystical, a more mystical approach where we have contact with the divine ourselves. That's what the New Testament also helps us understand. So that shift in terms of what the Old Testament looks like, and this is specifically, again, the communication, what the communication looks like between the Old and the New Testament, that is not God changing per se. This is us with a new understanding of how it works, right? The Old Testament and the New Testament were writings written down by humans with whatever understanding they were at that time. It moves from that intermediary idea of the message of God coming through one person to a more direct communication with us as well. Teachings that presented to the masses were also in more common terms, those parables that Jesus used. That communication was aimed at the common person and what they could take away from it and learn from and progress themselves. The topics were forgiveness, love, and the idea of the kingdom of God within. Not the kingdom of God out there, which many people misinterpreted in the Old Testament. The kingdom of God within. These messages, these lessons that we're talking about, and especially with that communication, were that indwelling connection that we have with the divine, the indwelling connection that we always have, don't we? We always have, but sometimes we what? Forget. Yes, absolutely. Sometimes we forget, but the connection is never broken, is my argument. It's just buried sometimes, forgotten in the hurt, confused, but the connection is always there. Always, always, always. So that is the divine communication that we're talking about here. Don Miguel Ruiz. What a great book. I think I've probably read this 3 or 4 times. Don't make assumption is number 3 in this list of 4 right here. And we did talk about that during Pub Theology. What Don Ruiz would tell us in this chapter of the book is that communicate with others as clearly as you can in order to avoid misunderstandings. Communicate with others as clearly as you can. But why? Why? Why does he say that? What he says is that with just one agreement, you can completely transform your life. With this one agreement, he says, your life will change. Your relationships will change. How you feel in your communication with your fellow human will change. If you do this one thing and not make assumptions in your communications with others. So what does he say? How do we do that? How do we do that? Well, first of all, if we're having a conversation, we don't read between the lines, right? Somebody says A and B and C, and it's like, oh, but they really meant, or they must have meant, or what I think that they probably meant. That's what we're trying to avoid, is reading between the lines here. And again, how do we do this? We asked ourselves on Thursday night. One of the things was, if we're unsure about that conversation with that other person, if we're not quite there with what did they mean, what can we do? Ask. Ask. It seems so obvious, but we skip that step so many times. We jump right into, well, they must have meant. And then we take it personally, which is another one. But ask the question, what did you mean when you said whatever what did you mean by this that you said? And then pause and listen, right? Wow. This engages us in that honest dialogue that helps with that communication. This is the ability of being mindful in the moment of that conversation. This is where we get to pause and we get to stay present with that person. We're not thinking about the next thing we're going to say. We're trying to understand what's being communicated in the moment, in the now, in the present. And sometimes that's asking questions. Sometimes that's just pausing and let that sink in. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm going to hang on to that. I'm going to leave it up on the screen. Another one of our authors that we like to talk about within Unity is Brene Brown. Anybody know Brene Brown? I mean, not personally, of course, but you know of her. And you might have read articles, you might have even seen, first of all, she is a social scientist who became later a best-selling author. She did a TED Talk. Has anyone seen her TED Talk on vulnerability? Yeah. 60 million people have seen that TED Talk. I think that's, if it's not the number one, it's the top 5 of the watched TED Talk out there, it's incredible. It's incredible. I took a college communications course in my education, and we were required to watch this multiple times in order to understand communication techniques. We picked apart her TED Talk. It's an incredible lesson and a learning tool for good communication. Like I said, she is a social scientist, and social scientists tell us that there is a direct correlation between our assumptions that we make and our expectations on how others will act. Do you hear what that is? You hear what I'm saying? Your assumption becomes an expectation in your conversation with others. And some of that is clouded by the framework of the lens you're looking through in the things that have happened to you in your life in the past. But your assumptions cloud your vision, and you might be expecting that person to insult you. You might be almost expecting someone to be mean to you because of those clouded lenses that you've adopted and are unwilling to take off and lay aside. Think about your reaction to others and how it says more about you than it does about them. Think about that. When those assumptions and expectations don't match our conversations with other people in the world, we end up judging, we end up being disappointed, we shut down emotionally. That's the negative piece of those expectations that sometimes happen. The result is that we're no longer feeling connected to that person, right? We're setting up a wall, we're backing off. We're not communicating anymore. I don't even know what to call that anymore. That's not even communication. After a lifetime of relationships and conversations with people, we start to expect things to happen in a certain way. Some of us expect, anyway, I'm just going to say there's a wide range of expectations out there based on everything that's happened in your past and what you're not ready to let go of. That's the expectation. And you might be saying to yourself, in this certain situation, I'm going to skip ahead and predict what this person might say or mean after those few words that they've said. I have an expectation. And sometimes with very little data, very few words on why they've said that or on what it actually means. Sometimes we throw in that why. It's because they blah, blah, blah. That's the judgment that we want to get away from as well. Unfortunately, when this happens, we're no longer treating the relationship as divine. That's what we're saying in this situation here. As we're talking about communication with the divine and each other as divine, when we're skipping ahead and making those expectations and assumptions, we've disconnected from that divine conversation. We think, they should have done this. I really wish they would have said that. And everyone knows you shouldn't ever say that, right, in a conversation. How dare they say that to me? Not understanding, not pausing, not moving into that divine conversation. So my affirmation for this week says today, but moment by moment, I express myself clearly, avoiding any misunderstandings. I'm taking responsibility. Hear that again. I'm taking responsibility for how that communication shows up. I'm not even saying, well, it's a 50-50 thing. It takes two to tango. I'm saying this conversation This divine communication is my responsibility, and I move forward with that, which I don't always do. I don't always do. I got to admit that. What are some of our practical steps that we go through in terms of how we understand this communication? This is our practical Christianity, if you will. This is what we do step by step throughout our week. This is how we show up in the world as well. This is that divine communication and assumptions. Become clear of our divine relationships. Understand what that means and really take that into heart. In other words, truly understand that everyone is deserving of that clear communication. Deserving is the key word here. Everyone that you meet is deserving. Not just the nice people, not just the people that you agree with, not just the people that you have made friends. Everyone is deserving of this communication, this divine connection that we're talking about, this flow of divine love within our mode of communication. Sometimes we ask questions to understand others. This is that incoming communication. So we're going to talk about in and out. That incoming means that sometimes I pause and ask the question, what did you mean here? The question might be, even if I totally disagree with what that person has just said, maybe because I totally disagree with what that person has said, I pause and I say, tell me more. Not easy, but helpful. This one came out on Thursday. I'm not going to embarrass the person who said it, but it was an awesome, awesome question. Can you give me an example of that? Great question, huh? Can you give me an example? And maybe even a step further, can you give me an example of that from your own life, of when that happened or when that showed up in your... So that person isn't talking about the they in society, but really speaking from the I as well. And maybe even another step is helping that communication get in touch. It's, how did that feel when that happened? These are the questions that we ask when we want to truly understand, when we want that incoming communication to be understood. And when we want to make sure that our assumptions are valid, we want to pause as well. And here's my example of that communication as well, those assumptions. Back in the days when I was in corporate America, I was one of my jobs. For about 10 years, I worked for Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida in their IT department. And it's a cubicle farm. Me and 5,000 other people were working in cubicles, right? But I had a department of about 20 people. And for the most part, we got along pretty well. One day, and you got to remember, the true mode of communication is not the emails that you're getting. It's not the official meetings that you attend. It's what happens at the water cooler, right? That's where you really understand what's going on in your own department. It's the water cooler thing. So at the water cooler one morning or one afternoon, it was one morning at the water cooler, I heard from somebody else, oh, I'm looking forward to the lunch today. It's somebody's being promoted, I think it was, and we're giving them a party. We're going out to lunch. I wasn't invited. Yeah, it's like, I was crushed. And I kind of slunk back to my cubicle and, Oh, woe is me, right? I mean, I felt devastated. Why wasn't I invited? Do they not like me anymore? And I did that for a couple hours. That pity stayed with me for a couple of hours until I accidentally went through my deleted emails and found my deleted emails, and I found that Fred had invited me. It was right there. But in my haste at the end of the day before, I had just deleted a bunch of emails. I was invited. They loved me. It wasn't poor, pitiful me. I had to check my assumptions. And I could have avoided that. Right then and there in that water cooler, as I was filling up my coffee cup, I could have said, oh, you guys are going out to lunch. Well, yeah, aren't you? Well, I didn't get an email. Well, everyone's invited. It would have saved me 2 hours of grief. So now, okay, we're headed out to lunch, and yes, we had a great time. Our call to action this week is to tune in, to readjust, to get clarity, to live from that strong signal. That's where we want to be, that strong signal that lets us hear that communication, both from those around us as well as the divine as well. The divine communication, no assumptions, these practical steps that we've just talked about here as well, and I'm going to go, and that's it for that. With the divine communication piece, we see that communication as the divine flow of love, right? The divine flow of love. This is something that we are all deserving of. We don't have to earn it. We were born and created that way. We deserve the love of divine communication. It is ours. Don't make assumptions. Ask the questions. Do all those things that we just talked about. Our expectations can sometimes cloud that conversation both ways. It can cloud it, so make sure you do not make assumptions. And then the practical steps are practical Christianity. Know that you are divine. Tell yourself that every day. I am a divine being, and then you can fill in the blank. Whatever you're working on. I am a divine being. Practice non-judgment in your conversations. Don't make the assumption that that person is this or that or less deserving or whatever. Non-judgment, and we strive to understand and be understood. It's my responsibility. I'm going to sing that. It's my responsibility to be understood and to understand. It goes both directions. It's a different way of tango. Know that I love you, I bless you, I appreciate you. I see the divine in your eyes. And when I give you that hug later on, namaste. Let's move into meditation. I invite you to find a comfortable space. Wiggle around, in other words. Placing your feet on the ground, both feet on the ground, if that's comfortable. This also grounds us with the energy of this earth. Placing your hands on your lap, on your thighs, on your knees, maybe folded. Whatever works best for you. Closing your eyes if that's comfortable, or watching that candle on the screen. And then breathing gently. Finding your own pace for that breath. But noticing the inhale. Noticing the exhale. Noticing the space between the two. Both at the top of that and at the bottom of that cycle. This allows us to focus, to move into the now, and to appreciate that quality of love in our communications with others. And I feel and I know that this consciousness, this thing I'm feeling in my heart, this communication, becomes one of anticipation. This love that I feel in my heart space, as it's growing, as it's warming, as it spreads throughout my whole body, becomes one of my reality. This is the love in my life. I realize that this reality, this love, is spiritual in nature, that this reality is based on that quality of love. And I know without a doubt, deep down, this is my reality. I also know that when I find myself in times where I've forgotten this reality of love, I can simply go back within. I can turn within again, pause, and open up to that quality once again. It's not so much a searching for, it's just a pause and allowing it to again fill my awareness. As we take a moment or two in silence. And as we begin to come out of that silence, we bring our awareness back into this room. We might blink our eyes open once again and take with us that feeling, that birthright of love within our lives that never leaves us. And so it is. Namaste.
Thank you, Reverend Jim. So now we get to experience the incredible power of giving and receiving. It's your very presence and your generous gifts that allow Unity of Charlotte to continue to grow and love and serve our work, community and our world. So there's so many ways for consistent giving. They're listed here on the slide. We say them every week, so I'm not going to go through each one. But know that there are scannable codes in the plates as it goes by. So if you would choose to give online, we make that easily available. They're also on the bulletin board. So please join with me now as we say our abundance blessing together. Hold that offering in your hand if you have a physical one. If not, just put your hands together and imagine that gift. As we say together, joyously I give this gift, knowing the divine presence blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. We are light, love, power, and presence. Wherever we are, God is, and all is well.